Okay, I want to thank everyone for attending today's session on a new approach to talent attraction, brand building, and recruitment. This session is focused on recruiting for diversity. Recruiting for diversity matters in manufacturing due to the skill shortage and retention challenges. We will begin with a few foundational concepts and explore how to enhance recruitment and workplace practices towards greater diversity, equity, and inclusion. This session will feature Nora Fawaz from Build a Dream, as well as Janine Lasselin-Berglund, the president of the Canadian Association of Mold Makers and Automate Canada, and Jonathan Etziparty, president and CEO of Laval International, which designs, engineers, and manufactures molds for heavy trucks, recreational vehicles, military, and government applications. My name is Walter Garrison, and I'm the Advanced Manufacturing Business Integrator for the City of Mississauga, working out of our Mississauga Economic Development Office. I work with manufacturing companies in the aerospace, automotive, food and beverage, clean technologies, and medical device sectors, as well as with our specialty manufacturers. We have many world-class and globally leading manufacturers in Mississauga, and I, along with my economic development colleagues, assist them in talent and workforce development, site selection, expansion and retention, business-to-business connections, continuous improvement, supply chains, and export market development, amongst our other services. Our Mississauga EDO advocates on behalf of our manufacturers to other levels of government and provides connections to those agencies that can assist them with their growth opportunities and challenges. Before we proceed, I want to inform all attendees about a few key points regarding today's session. Audio is available for speakers and panelists only. The camera display is available for speaker and panelists only. This session is being recorded and will be available after today's webinar. For all attendees, please use the chat area to offer comments and ask questions. Please address these to all panelists. Today's presentation, resources, and a feedback survey will be emailed to attendees following today's session. We acknowledge the lands which constitute the present-day City of Mississauga as being part of the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and Wyandot nations. We recognize these peoples and their ancestors as peoples who inhabited these lands since time immemorial. The City of Mississauga is home to many global Indigenous people. Back in March of 2020, the before times as we like to call them, our Mississauga Economic Development Office hosted Building Skilled Talent Together, an event where we brought together our Mississauga manufacturers, colleges, universities, secondary schools, government agencies, and stakeholder groups to discuss and develop solutions to the skilled talent shortage currently facing the advanced manufacturing sector in Mississauga. While this is a global challenge, our Mississauga EDO was and is focused on finding solutions to having more people trained and employed in the occupations within manufacturing that require STEM skills. One of the organizations we worked with at the event was Build a Dream, who ran one of the event workshops. This was where I first met Nora. Nora Fawaz is the founder and CEO of Build a Dream. Nora is a dynamic person who is really committed to the mission of her organization, Build a Dream, which delivers specialized programs to encourage and empower women students to explore careers where women are underrepresented, while also working to create a gender-balanced workforce and change global perspectives on women's contribution to society. In the spring of 2021, our Mississauga Economic Development Office, in conjunction with Build a Dream, held 2 meetings with women in management and human resource positions representing a number of Mississauga's leading manufacturers. From these meetings, Mississauga EDO and Build a Dream have developed this program intended to have more women participate, stay, and advance in the Mississauga advanced manufacturing workforce. These lunch and learn sessions on recruitment and attraction, retention, and advancement of women in the advanced manufacturing workforce is a result of our earlier Mississauga EDO events and is part of Mississauga EDO diversity and inclusion initiatives. We have a number of objectives for our 3 lunch and learn sessions. We want to encourage more women to consider a career in advanced manufacturing with one of our many excellent companies in Mississauga. We want to assist you attending this webinar today in your recruitment and attraction of women into available employment positions in your organizations. We want to help you retain the women that you hire within your organization. The pandemic has led to a number of significant and impactful challenges for manufacturers globally. A number of women have left positions in the industry as they have been the primary child care provider. While manufacturing companies have been operating during COVID, many have done so at a reduced capacity. Now that a number of sectors are ramping up their production levels and volumes, will the workforce that experienced layoffs or left their roles by choice come back to their positions? Retention is a real challenge, and I hear this from a number of the women that have left the advanced manufacturing workforce during the pandemic. The challenge is for companies to determine how to attract and recruit them again. I also want to remind all attendees that next Tuesday, December 7th at 12 noon, we will be concluding our Women in Mississauga Manufacturing Lunch and Learn sessions. We will discuss tangible tools to help with retention of female employees in the advanced manufacturing workplace. This session will feature Nora along with Rebecca Chenier, who is working as a mechanic at Hiram Walker and Sons in Windsor and is a Red Seal Industrial Millwright. We will also have Kim Thierra, President and CEO of Acetronic, a Mississauga manufacturer of industrial controls, and Simi Thierra, Acetronic's Director of Strategic Development and Sales. If you have not registered for this session, please do. You can access the link to register from the events and webinars section on the Future is Unlimited website. I will put a link to the session registration in the chat. I would now like to introduce Nora and our speakers. Nora Hakim Fawaz is the founder and CEO of Build a Dream and will be leading today's session. Nora wants to change global perspectives on women's contribution to society. Inspired by her mother's perseverance to excel in a male-dominated field, Nora dug deep into the why behind the lack of women in skilled trades. She realized that the barriers keeping women out of these rewarding careers were common to other male-dominated paths and created a nonprofit to encourage and empower young women to explore careers they may never have considered. Nora's challenge to listeners is that one must first address internal preconceptions before being capable of making significant strides that transform our work and world. A brilliant connector and facilitator, audiences are drawn to her candor and unique perspective from an extensive career in workforce development and her lived experiences as a woman of color. She shares energetic stories of what leaders are doing right and offers real-world examples of how embracing diverse workplaces accelerates success. Nora earned her Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Windsor and expanded Build a Dream across Canada while completing her MBA, raising children, and earning many awards and accolades. She spends each day following her passion, creating equity not just in the workplace, but in all of the spaces around us. I would also like to introduce our speakers for today. Janine Lasselin Berglund is the president of the Canadian Association of Mold Makers and Automate Canada. Janine brings over 30 years of work experience, starting her career in manufacturing as a skilled trade, rising through various positions in leadership and expanded responsibilities. As an operations expert, she understands the challenges of manufacturing in a global market. Her ability to build trust and rapport quickly also contributes to her leading teams and organizations to deepen their impact, both professionally and personally. Her resume lists a variety of certifications, accomplishments, and contributions to boards, leadership development, coaching, facilitating, and a Six Sigma Green Belt. Jonathan Etziparty is the president and CEO of Laval International, which designs, engineers, and manufactures molds for heavy trucks, recreational vehicles, military, and government applications. Jonathan Etziparty has spent his career involved in the manufacturing industry for the past 20 years. Being the youngest boy of a family of 9 in a successful mold-making family, he would later go on to follow in his father's footsteps as the president and CEO of Laval International. Jonathan grew his family's business into a multi-million-dollar international corporation. Jonathan takes his responsibility as a young leader in his community very seriously by sitting on many not-for-profit committees, boards, and charitable organizations. Jonathan has also been recognized by his peers by being awarded the Women Enterprise Skills Training of Windsor, the Trailblazer Award, United Way Leadership Windsor Essex 40 Leaders Under 40 Years of Age, the Quantum Shift Canada's Top Entrepreneurs Class of 2017, United Way I Believe in My Community Award, and the Automotive News Who's Who Canada 2019. I will now ask Nora from Build a Dream to take us through today's session. Nora.
Thank you so much, Walter, for that wonderful introduction. Before I get started, I would like to let everyone know that we are broadcasting live from Windsor, Ontario, and I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. Build a Dream would like to acknowledge that we are on land and surrounded by water, originally inhabited by Indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. Build a Dream would like to respectfully acknowledge that the land on which we broadcast from today is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations comprised of the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi peoples. We are grateful to work, learn, and live in this area. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. So, as Walter mentioned, my name is Nora the president and founder of the Build a Dream organization. And one thing I love to do is connect the pieces for industry to be able to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in their workforce. So after attending the Mississauga event pre-COVID, Walter and I continued our conversation about what needs to be done. And we're all about action at our organization. And we came up with this Lunch and Learn series. The first one, it was all about the data, how to use your data within your organization to tell your story. And today's session is all about recruitment and brand building and how to position your organization as a diverse, equitable, and inclusive company that is looking to diversify and build their workforce. So here with me is John and Janine. John is going to play the role of an employer, and Janine's going to play the role of the leader of an association, actually the first woman to lead this association. And together, they're going to shape a story for everyone who is tuning in. And at the end, we're going to do a quick fireside chat and answer any of the questions that we often hear behind closed doors, just to create a more comfortable and honest session with everyone and answer the questions that you may have. If you have additional questions, please feel free to add them in the chat, and I will be checking in, and Walter will cue me as well. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the session over to John, and then we'll turn it over to Janine right after.
All right, so Walter, if you just want to start with the presentation, we'll, as you're getting that queued up, I'll start by just thanking Walter and Nora for getting us the opportunity to be able to engage, because I think that, you know, as a role that we play as from business to business is a little mentoring. So I think that's important. So that's what we're going to do a little bit of today. But the first thing I want to establish is that, you know, what we are as a company, who we are, what's the starting point, kind of lay the lay of the land, if you don't mind. So first things first, my name's John as a party. I've been in the industry for a long time. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly from the industry. The company itself is about 43 years old. But I want to show you a bit of a transition period that we went through. And I think some of you will actually probably be able to appreciate that. And some of you probably have your own stories of this period of time, but I want to show you what we've started from and what we've become. So Walter, if you can go to the next slide, please. So we're a manufacturer. Really doesn't matter what we make, but we make molds and parts like we talked about. But most of us remember 2006, right? This is a period of time when there's a lot of turmoil, there's a lot of change, there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty. This is basically the financial meltdown that happens in 2006. And it didn't matter whether you were a financial institution or a manufacturer, everybody felt it, right? And everybody stopped for about 2 years and really took an inventory of their business, right? And us as a manufacturer here in Windsor, Ontario, we did exactly the same thing. I mean, we literally almost went out of business at this period of time. And these are some of the reasons why. If you look in the top left-hand corner, you'll see that, you know, 90% of our business came from 3 main clients, right? Not uncommon for an SME. The sector that we did business in was almost entirely automotive. That's that wheel in the middle. And you keep going to the right, you'll see that we were very limited in our services that we provided to our clients. You know, we did our basics, right? We just did the bare minimum that we had to do, right? We did business in the United States and Canada primarily. We did mold design, construction, and repair. But what I want to focus on today is that far left-hand side. We were only about 16 employees. The average age of our workforce was about 55, okay? Human resources was an area that we knew was going to be a problem. But at the time, in 2006, when there wasn't an abundance of business, you know, it was manageable, right? We had 0 apprentices, which means we didn't have a youthful workforce. And one key thing is they were men only, right? So next slide, please, Walter. So we're going to fast forward here for a second. We're going to go 10 years or so ahead, about 15 years, and now we're a much different company, right? We're much larger, and we're still growing. We're going to do the same exercise, but we're going to do the same exercise 10 years, 15 years in advance, and we're going to say that, only 50% of our business is with 3 clients, right? So we've got a much more diversified customer base. You can see that we actually serve a much larger variety of sectors. You can see heavy truck, household construction, still automotive, recreational vehicles, construction vehicles, and we're growing. You see it continuing to the right, you can see that the services that we provide are much more diverse. It's almost like a vertical integration of a company. We've become much more complicated. We've had to supply more because what we learned is that we learned to compete on a global basis. We couldn't just do the same old thing we've been doing for the last, let's say, 30 years. We had to offer a much more variety of services to be able to compete on a global scale. And we added Mexico to the equation. So we actually set up shop in Mexico. We started doing business in Mexico. And we're trying to actually promote ourselves as an international company. And today I'm proud to say that we're 84 employees. Our average age is at 40. And about 30% of our workforce is either apprentices or women on the shop floor. Now, why is this slide so critical before we go to the next slide? Well, as a company, we grew. And we not only grew in sales like we traditionally measure companies, but we grew in complexity and staff. And that meant that we were under a great deal of stress to try and create a company that was inclusive. So we tried to create a company that looks like this. If you go to the next slide, Walter. Now, there's a lot of things going on in this slide, but it's going to boil down to these main key points. 4 pillars of success: networking, education, presence, and connection. Those are our 4 pillars. We very much concentrate on these 4 pillars in everything that we do. So we're networking constantly with our community, our customer base, our employees. So we're networking them on a regular basis. Education, we constantly are educating ourselves, our workforce, and our clients on what we provide in services and where we're going. Presence, people want to do business with companies that are diverse and have a global footprint. And that means embracing the cultural differences that you're trying to work either in or with, which is very important. The last one, which is probably most important and most relevant to this conversation, is connections. Human resource was our connection with our workforce. And our ability to be able to make it work with a variety of different cultures and D&I was actually a big challenge for my business. And this is where we're going to spend the next maybe 5 minutes, and I'm going to describe that to you. So as you can see, this took about 15 years for us to make this transition, and we're still not done. I don't believe we're anywhere close to meeting our goal. Even though we're at 30%, we still have a long way to go. And the things that we've been trying to fight seem like they should be easy to remove, but you got to remember the starting point by which we were at. Like a physical limitation, most of our plants didn't have women's washrooms, which seems crazy, but 15, 20 years ago, believe it or not, that actually wasn't part of the makeup. It wasn't just something that was normal. It was actually out of the ordinary. And those are physical limitations that we've had to overcome over the last 15 years. And some of the things that I've learned over this time is that most of these things that we're trying to overcome are actually not real. They were actually things that were either ingrained in us or that were traditions or habits. And these are the things that we're having to overcome to not only attract women, but to retain women. So I'll give you an example, one from both sides of the equation. The first one is physical limitations. If you ask some women about, if they're going to take a career in manufacturing, which that's what I'm in, they'll say, well, I'm not physically able to do that. Well, that might have been true 25 years ago, but that's not true today. But yet it's still there. It's still present in people's idea of what manufacturing is all about. Then on the other side of the equation, I have employers who say things like, well, the policies are too complicated and they're too cumbersome, and I can't put them in place so that I can attract D&I, a diversified workforce, or incorporating women in my workforce. The policies are just too complicated. I'm not willing to take that on. And I hear that from large corporations, not just small ones like my own of 85 employees, but I've heard it with large corporations. And to me, these two things really are not real. What we've learned is that the policies in place are there to protect everybody, so they should be in place, and they're not as complicated as you think, and by law you're supposed to have them. And the physical limitations that existed 25 years ago are no longer there. And women and employers really kind of set these barriers prior to them actually getting to the application process. They don't even actually try and overcome those before they even enter this sector, and it's quite quite disappointing, and it shows. Right now, only 3% of our workforce is women, but yet they're 50% of our population. And we are complaining as employers that we don't have enough workforce, but yet we're putting up these barriers that are non-existent. And it really breaks my heart. And that's been my driving force for at least the last 15 years. is to find solutions to break down these barriers so that we can just connect the dots. Because we can connect the dots, I really do believe that women are the key to unlocking the skilled trade shortage we have in Canada, which would just unlock so many opportunities for us as a country. The last thing that I'd leave you with is that one of the things that I think we need to do is embrace the diversity and inclusion that comes from D&I. Don't do D&I just for the sake of doing D&I. You need to do D&I because you're going to embrace the advantages and the opportunities that come from it, and those are actually going to help you grow your business. Do it in your management team, do it in your workforce, make them part of the team, and I promise you the rewards versus the risk is going to be so much bigger. And I'm going to hand it over to Janine.
Well, thanks so much for that, John. And you're always a tough act to follow. So I think we'll start first with throwing our presentation up there on the screen. I want to thank everyone for including me in today. I think there's so much that we can be talking about, and there are never enough hours in a week to have a conversation. So actually, if you just go back one slide there, I think we can get started. Or we can start here. This is fine. It was just a cover sheet. So first of all, a little bit about our associations. The Canadian Association of Mold Makers and Automate Canada are industry associations that represent member companies working in these sectors. And I think it's important to recognize that, you know, the work of an association is in many ways to support our members through a number of different initiatives. I think for most of our audience, they'll be familiar with the concept of an industry association. But for those maybe new to that idea, one of the things we do is to continue to provide a voice for the folks in our membership. And that voice can be in events like this, or that voice can be in advocacy work that we do with government regarding policy. The second thing that we do is present a united brand, if you will, specifically for those companies that don't have a brand on their own. But a lot of the branding that we do with respect to our respective industry groups is in trade commissions that happen all over the world and looking to explore business opportunities for our member companies. And in some cases, that branding is a way for us to unite the companies inside of our membership towards other activities that are going on. And the other thing that we do is to provide, you can go ahead another slide there, Walter, is to provide resources for those companies that are in our membership as well. You know, one of our mandates is not only to represent them as a voice, but to find ways to support their development and support the initiatives that are important to them. And so whether those things are stabilizing their business, providing training and development, working to make sure that we have resources available to answer questions and partners in communities where our member companies might experience some lack of expertise. We want to bring all of that under one umbrella for them. So the purpose of today, and go to the next slide, if you will, please, Walter, is we as industry associations have, like Jonathan mentioned, some pillars of activity. Inside of those pillars of activity, one of the things that we do, one of our pillars is branding and collaboration, and that's working with like-minded agencies in order to further our initiatives. Another pillar or strategic pillar that we have is the adoption of technology and the continuing to support and foster a community of innovation. And the third strategic pillar for both of these associations is skill and talent development. And so that's what drives not only our involvement in this initiative and our involvement in many initiatives related to that. So some of what we do inside of strategic pillars of activity is we form committees and groups to work on furthering initiatives. And we also work with partners such as Build a Dream. So the next slide, Walter. There's a stat on this slide here that says there's 8.6 million women working in Canada, and they make up about 48% of the Canadian workforce, but only 28% of them have jobs in manufacturing. They hold less than 5% of the jobs in some production-related occupations. And that's a staggering number to a person like me who has spent their whole life in manufacturing. One of the reason why I put this up here is because many organizations, like Jonathan had mentioned, are really struggling to figure out how they're going to fill the skills gap, not only today, but in the coming days and the coming months and the coming years for their organizations. We know that change is happening quickly, and we know that in order to have women employed in the sector, we first have to make sure that women know about careers in these sectors. So that's one of the ways that we are working to move this initiative, or excuse me, move the statistics on this and have more women and more folks that are underrepresented in this industry working in the industry in the next 20 years. So again, we know that women have to apply in order to be considered. So the next slide, if you will, Walter. Some of the ways that we're working to make sure is that, starting with young students and young women in grade school even, and working with partners like Build a Dream and Skills Ontario to make sure that young people are aware of the careers and the possibility of sustainability for their own initiatives very early on, and helping them to identify competencies, key areas of interest that might make them great recruits for this industry. The other thing that we do is we work with groups to offer some insight into what working in manufacturing looks like today. Working with Skills Ontario, and we've had, I'm sure, pockets around the province of Ontario where folks are engaged in something called Manufacturing Day, which was an initiative that was born out of the US and has migrated to Canada. And this is a way for manufacturers to be able to expose what goes on in their buildings to give a more relevant picture, particularly to young people, about what a career in manufacturing might look like. We also attend events and make ourselves available to discuss all kinds of things to do with an embracing environment and how to build a culture of inclusivity so that our manufacturers, particularly those that don't know how, have the tools they need in order to get there. And then we provide information and access to other supports that our member organizations could use on their journey for inclusion and diversity. So the last slide I have up here is, feel free, if any of those things resonate with you and you are working in advanced manufacturing in either mold making or industrial automation, we would love to connect with you. And here's a quick snapshot of our two industry association websites, but certainly feel free to connect with us any way you can. We're on all of your social media channels, and keep abreast of the things that we're doing, particularly in this category. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nora.
Thank you so much, Janine. I'm going to ask both you and John to come back for a fireside chat. So one of the things that I really wanted to highlight today, and a conversation, topics that continuously come up in our conversations with industry, is change. How do we go from only having one or two applicants to increasing our applicant pool of women, or a diverse talent pool, to be able to not only attract them, recruit them, but also retain them within our sector? And it brings me to the conversation, John, you and I had over 10 years ago at this time, when we started our strategic approach to increase the number of women in manufacturing in Windsor, Ontario. And you highlighted it a little bit in your conversation. You talked about the policies are too complicated. And I remember having this conversation with you where you said to me, it was the start of the shift. You had an employee who you gave special accommodations to because she had to drop off her daughter at daycare, and daycare didn't open till 7:30. So by the time she got to your building was 8 a.m. And that created some friction with the employees. Walk me through that example, and what advice would you give to companies right now that are kind of in the same scenario?
Well, it's a complicated situation because, and thank you for using that example, Nora, because it's one that we actually struggled with a lot, and it's the flexibility of your workforce. And I think the first place for any workplace is to understand why we put these constraints on ourselves. And that's what we had to figure out, right? We kind of had to say, okay, so why is 7 o'clock such an important starting time? And why does everybody have to start at 7, right? So you have to be approaching the subject with an open mind and willing to question the things, the habits that you had, previously. So when I asked the question why we start at 7, nobody really could answer the question other than the fact that we always started at 7 o'clock. Right. So that wasn't a good enough of an answer. It was like, okay, yeah, well, 7 o'clock's good, but why 7? And then we came up with the conclusion to say, okay, well, maybe 7 o'clock isn't necessarily the answer, but all of us starting at the same time is what's important. And then I asked the question, I said, well, why do we do that? Why do we all have to start at the same time? Right. So we ask really important questions of our staff and our managers to get to the really root of all these habits that we have, right? And then we started to say, okay, so if we both all agree that these things are just habits and they don't really have much bearing on how we actually how we operate as a business, then how do we change it? How do we make it so that it actually still accomplishes both sides of the equation, right? The employer and the employee. And what I realized very quickly is that policies, right, in our company are driven from habits and actions, right? And it's an ebb and flow, right? And what we had to do is we had to, still serve the master of our clients and meet their demands, but our habits had to change, which means that we were changing our culture in our business, right? Habits and actions actually are culture. So our culture became one of more flexibility because we realized we could still meet the expectations of our client while still providing flexibility to our workforce. So what we ended up deciding was is that people could start at 7:30 or they could start earlier. They could start at 5 as long as we still meet the customer's expectations. And now what we've got is we've got a workforce who has flexibility to still meet their family obligations, which should always come first. And I'm not just saying that, even my own family obligations have to come first. But as long as the respect is both sides, we can still meet our customers' expectations and everybody still is on the same side, including my employees. Because what we did is we decided that this could be good for not just the women of our workforce, but be good for our men of our workforce to be better fathers, not just women for being better mothers. So we actually have employees who start at 5 in the morning and finish at 2, and they pick up their kids on their way home so that their wife could actually work a little bit later. So by changing the culture of the plant, we actually figured out that this wasn't exclusive to women. It was men too. And we could actually make it better for everybody. So we just had to let go of those habits that we really couldn't substantiate.
John, thank you so much for highlighting that. And this is a conversation I remember having with you and Janine as we were preparing for this session. And we talk about the penalty that women face in this sector. And what I mean by that is that the assumption that you just mentioned, that policies need to be more women friendly as opposed to family friendly, or the penalty of not having a women's facility on the shop floor, or even having to restructure the way we look at industry and redefining women's role not only in the workforce but within society in general. And so, Janine, I know that's something you're very passionate about. And so when you hear your members and some of the what I like to call unfiltered conversations, what do you think realistically is stopping companies from attracting and recruiting, and what could they do differently?
Wow, that's a loaded question, Nora. How come Jonathan gets the easy ones?
I'm sure there's more coming to origin.
Um, I would say, well, first off, I think a lot of things that holds, I think the biggest barrier for anyone is always going to be fear of the unknown. If you have been in an employer's building, or you are an employer who has only done things one way the whole time, fear of doing things differently and the fallout for that could be one of the things that holds you back. And I think that's largely true for a lot of our small to medium-sized enterprises. I think also having lack of resources that are inside their building in order to help them support change is another way that, or is another weight that many of them carry. And then couple that with the idea that they really don't want to expose those lackings that they have inside their building to the general public or to others on the outside, uh, just complicates the matter altogether and probably prevents them from asking for help. So I think those are some of the challenges. I think, on the overcoming those things, I think there are a couple of things that manufacturers looking to expand their workforce and taking a look at what's included in diversity and inclusion is to work with a trusted partner. We are fortunate to have a number of trusted partners that we can work with, but it's important to ask questions. And by asking questions, it I think allows an opportunity then for you to get some real insight. And whether those questions are asking your workforce how they feel about things, or whether those questions are asking a trusted partner on the outside and getting some real thought behind how would you strategically approach something, or how would you overcome some of those barriers, are a good place to start.
Those were excellent examples. And speaking of partners, John, just because I've been working with you for over 10 years now, there are partnerships that you formed within the community that supported your diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Can you talk about some of those partnerships and what they entail, and what recommendation do you have for companies in the city of Mississauga, and what worked for you?
Well, I would say this is that, I believe that in some places these partnerships exist, and if they don't exist, they might exist in some form. But the first thing is that obviously you want to make sure that, the partnership from my side is that there's a need. And I think the need is no matter what, right? So even start in your own home backyard, right? In your manufacturing sector. And I don't think the manufacturing sector is the only place that's looking for good employees and good team members at this point. I think everybody is, but start here. Once you figure out your own needs and what you need to be successful, then you're going to reach out to the multiple of groups that you need, and it's everybody's at the table. So we go to our secondary schools, we go to our colleges and universities, so post-secondary, they're your partners, right? So you want a young generation, you want a young workforce, you have to go straight to the source, right? You can't wait for somebody else to create these connections, so they need to be at the table. And it's not uncommon for me to call directly to the high schools. It's not uncommon for me to call directly to the school boards and actually have one-on-one conversations with them. And then once you open yourself up to that side, you'll be surprised. You're going to get calls back. Like I have parents who call me, right? And they're actually asking for, is this a great place? Can I stop by? What I read this on your website. Like I've actually gotten phone calls from parents of young women and young men who are asking me, questions about my own business, right? What do I do? How do I do it? Is it a safe place? So you have to be ready for that. The other one is that you need to start looking for groups who understand the other side of the equation. And that was really important for me. Like Nora, we talk about where we were 10 years ago, right? And you were at an organization called West, right? And West is totally devoted to understanding why women are not included in the skilled trades and entrepreneurship, right? So I had to step back and actually take a lesson on what it meant to understand the other side of the equation. And sometimes that's a little bit hard for a business owner because we're trying to run a business. And we're like, well, if they're not going to conform to our ways, well, then, then I don't need them here. Well, sometimes you got to step back and actually listen to the partners that you're inviting to the table and actually let it sink in that, although they might be women, their needs might be unique. You can still accommodate the needs of the other side while still accomplishing your goals, right? So you gotta sit back and actually listen a little bit. And then at the end of the day, women or anybody in the D&I group that's on the other side of the equation, they're going to be your partners as well. They need to actually be part of the conversation. They may not be your future employee. They might just be somebody in the community who expresses themselves or communicates well, like yourself, like Janine and Nora, right? They may not be part of any organization, but they may be able to give you some education. And I think that's why we always said that part of our job is to be educated, to listen, to be empathetic. And the partners on the other side of the equation need to be prepared to relay that information to us so that we can actually understand and actually adopt those new ways of thinking, because we're talking about an industry that's been around for, in our case, 70 years in Windsor, Essex. We've done things the same way for so long that we have to do a little deprogramming before we reprogram, if that makes sense.
Yeah, certainly. And this session is called brand building. And one of the points I really want to get across in a conversation that I often have with industry is that the diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy needs to be as strong as your bottom line strategy. And when I look at the work that you've done at Laval and just as a leader in the community, you made a commitment 10 years ago to say, Laval needs to diversify, and I'm going to make every effort. I'm going to listen, but I'm also going to take action. And some things that you did mention that you were a part of was Women's Enterprise Skills Training of Windsor that focuses solely on getting women out of off of social assistance and into the workforce. And then they designed the Women in Manufacturing program. You got involved with St. Clair College. You take on Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Program. I see someone in the audience that has a specialist high skills major program. You were in the roundtable for YMCA and trying to get more newcomers into the industry. It's a huge investment. And so as a business owner, and this is a question that we often get, or a small to medium-sized company, how do you invest resources when you're already so limited with time?
Oh, it's a great question, but I'm going to put it to you this way. If you can't invest time in your HR group, you need to really think about where your business is going, because your HR is your human resources, and your business doesn't exist without human resources. So you better make the time, because right now the number one concern amongst all manufacturers and any business in Canada is human resources. It's the limiting factor. So if you can't make time for the most important resource in your business, you're going to have to make time, because I'm telling you now, the people who are making time are the people who are going to take full advantage of that opportunity, of that labor pool that is getting smaller by the day.
Jana, you waved. Do you want to add something to that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I think it's important for us to recognize the importance of the groups around you. So I'm going to say to all of those business owners and CEOs that have a difficult time delegating, this is the appropriate thing to delegate. Get your teams involved in finding and resources that can help support you. This is not, although it will fall to HR, it's not just an HR activity. One of the notes that I'd made to myself here too is that when we think about being able to employ women or employ people in that are of diverse circumstances, we don't often think to go to the places where those people are. We rely on old tools of the past and old recruiting methods. And that sometimes is not reaching our intended ideal recruit. So sometimes, in that respect, you might need to look at things differently. And this is where an industry association can help you. So if your organization is involved in sector-based activities, please connect with your local workforce development or your industry associations who are likely already doing work here that can help support you and help you with the delegation of those things that you need to get done in order to manage your business or manage even your culture and relationships a little bit better.
Those are some excellent points, Janine. And just to add on to that, if you want to go where your talent pool can possibly be, for example, if your website and if you're not on social media, then for a certain generation, your company doesn't even exist. And you're missing out on a large talent pool that literally gets all their information from social media. So it's really encouraging companies to build that brand, to build that narrative, that conversation around being a welcoming employer, a good paying employer, a positive employer. Things that the generation wants to hear, but also will attract them to want to apply. I always say,
Right.
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, Janine.
No, I was just, and sorry, Nora, I know there's a bit of a time lag, I think, with the tool that we're using today, but I was going to say, yeah, when you're talking about branding yourself as a welcoming employer, it's important to talk about those things that are important to the people that you're trying to connect. I mean, Jonathan mentioned, the challenges with childcare. And the assumption is that that's, largely a woman's responsibility. And even married people probably would agree that, when push comes to shove, it's usually mom that stays home, but that's not everywhere. But the point I want to make here is that single parents, regardless of gender or cultural diversity, are a rising norm in our society. And if you offer flexible start times, if you offer on-site childcare, if you offer incentives to help pay for childcare. Those are the things that you need to brand yourself in order to target the market that you're after. So it's not only thinking about the internal systems and policies that need to be in place. This now also becomes a marketing and branding activity to help separate you as the preferred employer or the employer of choice when it comes to this. And also, how connected are you to the community that you operate in? Jonathan has talked a lot about how he's connected, and that has given his organization some highlight in their community. And every time he talks about it, there are more and more people that are interested. You know, if you're an organization that is working, and albeit Mississauga is a large center, but I'm sure there are plenty of ways that you can continue to highlight what your business does differently when it comes to inclusion and diversity, or you know, hiring preferences, or the discussion around parity. Those are all important things when you're trying to attract people to careers that exist in your building.
Excellent point. One example that comes to my mind for a company in Mississauga is Mad Elevator, who supported their frontline staff in providing childcare subsidies so that they could pay a family member to watch their children while they went to work during COVID, recognizing that that impacted a lot of families and predominantly women in the workforce. So that is another great example of a best practice. There is a question in the chat that I really want to highlight because I think it's really important. Should the companies be focusing on upskilling or reskilling, or both?
Okay.
You want to go first, Jonathan?
Yeah, I'll take this one first, and I know you're going to lead right into what I say. So we believe that right now it's a three-prong approach to solving the skill trade shortage that we're dealing with today. And I've tried to profess that there is no one solution that's going to work that's going to solve it. We have a three-prong approach. So the first one is that we believe that newcomers to our country are going to solve it in the short term, which in that case that could be new skilling and upskilling. Okay, so we're going to have people who have experience, and we just need to teach them a new way. We're going to have people who are going to have no experience. So there's our first one, newcomers coming in. So this is all part of the DNI. So newcomers, that's going to help us in 0 to 12 months. You know, the 12 to 24 months, we believe this is where we're going to include, you know, women and other areas of underrepresentation in our industry. So we're going to have to do a lot of reskilling at that point, right? Because we have people coming into the workforce that may have never even really considered manufacturing. So we're going to do a lot of reskilling in that scenario, right? So for the next 12 to 24 months, we're going to have to, you know, take this workforce that we now have new access to. We're going to have to give them new skills, right? Qualities they already have, skills we can teach, right? And then the last one is that 24 to the next 5 years, this is where some of those questions that I see coming in the chat about high schools and started to, you know, bring grade 9s and 10s into our workforce. And I'm going to be honest with you, we actually bring 9 and 10-year-olds into our workplace to actually give them tours. So that's, you know, that's like grade 5, right? So we actually have them coming in our workforce. So if I have somebody who's in grade 5, you know, they're not going to be entering my workforce for the next, you know, 7 to 8 years. And they are going to be all about new skills, right? They're going to be all about, you know, learning that new machine or learning that new technology for us. And so there's no solution, no one solution that solves this. But what you do see is that it's all D&I. At the end of the day, it's all about diversity and inclusion, solving the solution. And it doesn't matter whether it's reskilling or upskilling. To me, it's all the same thing.
Thank you, John. Did you want to add anything, Janine? We probably have another minute to go. And if anyone has a question, we probably have one more time for one more question. Otherwise, we'll be gearing up to wrap up.
Yeah, I just want to add to that because, you know, I can't let Jonathan have the last word. I would say upskilling, reskilling, all of those things are important. I'm sure the conversation with many employers today is around skills, sustainability, as well as succession planning. If you don't have a way to help grow the talent inside your building, which can be conversations that start out of performance evaluations. They can be conversations that start around a person's particular interest in staying with your company and growing, and then providing avenues for them to get there. You're probably missing out on a few things if you aren't already doing those things. But if you are already doing those things, you know, there are some more unconventional ways of looking at upskilling and training and reskilling. One of them is to take a look at your folks that are eligible for retirement. I know many of them probably are eager to get to a point where they relax, but I know a lot of retirees who, you know, if they started at 18 or 19 years old in industry and after 30 years are looking to retire, they're not looking to stop maybe working or contributing. So there might be ways for you to take advantage of your retirees if they want to be contractors to your company, and now start to look at ways that you can engage those contractors in doing upskilling or providing shadowing resources or helping you take on more apprentices if that's something that your business does, so that you don't have to take time away from the workers that are doing the value added stuff and contributing to your bottom line. Now you have a whole activity engaged outside of that, and that's just one way. There's multiple ways that you can take a look at upskilling, training, and reskilling inside your own building.
Janine, thank you so much. And that is an excellent point. And I'm so glad that you had the last word. John, we love you, but Janine, that was awesome. One of the things I do want to highlight, and I think it's important because we have one more session, lunch and learn session happening. And the first one focused on using data to tell your story. This session focused on branding and what story do you want to tell? And I know that it's uncomfortable to look at the numbers and say, we don't even have one woman in production or one woman on the shop floor, but it always starts with one. And then they come, and then more come. And next week during our lunch and learn, we're going to show how that happens. We're going to highlight Rebecca Chenier, who was the first woman at Pernod Ricard to be recruited in 2021 in over 150 years as an industrial mechanic millwright. We'll talk about Kim Tiara and her daughter Simi, who run a manufacturing company, and the goals that they have in diversifying the workforce. So it does begin with one, and then it leads to the targets that we're trying to represent. So I just want to thank you all for attending today. And John and Janine, it's always such a pleasure speaking with you. Your insights are so valuable. And Walter, I'm so grateful for our partnership with the City of Mississauga.
Yes, thank you again very much, Nora, for this and for moderating today. I'm grateful for our partnership with Build a Dream. I think this is an excellent event. And I do want to thank Janine from Canadian Association of Mold Makers and Automate Canada, and Jonathan from Laval International. I think there's been many great insights shared. You know, one point I do want to make, it comes to both of your last points. Jonathan, when you talked about the three-pronged approach, there absolutely is. That's true. There is no one silver bullet to this. There are multiple solutions that have to be actioned on in order for this to work. And I think, Janine, this is a really excellent point, because a number of the companies that I deal with are turning away business. Like right now, they're turning away business because they don't have that person with that specialist skill. But that whole aspect of having retired people come back even on a part-time basis and mentoring and shadowing, I don't think we explore that enough. So I'm really interested. I know you're with Mold Makers and Automate Canada, but I'm sure a number of our other manufacturers could really get some good insights from what you're doing with respect to that. So if you don't mind, I'm going to follow up with you and see if we can do more work in this area, because it's a global challenge, but I'm interested in trying to solve it for our Mississauga manufacturers. So I'm really grateful for everybody's time here.
Absolutely. And Walter, you should know we have a GTA chapter of Canadian Association of Mold Makers and Automate Canada. So we're happy to go wherever you need us to go.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I appreciate everybody's time today. I hope all attendees got something out of today. I certainly did. And I'm looking forward to next Tuesday, December 7th, the session that we will have with Nora and our guests on that. So again, I want to thank Nora Hekhem-Fawaz from Build a Dream, Janine Lasling-Berglund from the Canadian Association of Mold Makers and Automate Canada, and Jonathan Atsaparty from Laval International. I hope everybody stays safe and stays healthy, and we will see you next Tuesday at 12 noon for our last session. Bye, everyone.